Welcome back to On Point, where we explore bold ideas, breakthroughs, and best practices reshaping medical affairs. I'm your host, Scott Thompson, CEO at Acceleration Point, and today, strap in because we're diving straight into one of the most buzzed about sessions from the recent Medical Affairs Professional Society annual meeting. It was standing room only, people were packed in shoulder to shoulder, and the buzz wasn't hype, it was real. Because this wasn't a panel full of fluff, it was a masterclass in reality. How Gen AI is actually being used today inside medical affairs. This wasn't just theory, it wasn't some futuristic daydream, it was just practical use cases, hard-won lessons, and some operational truths about deploying Gen AI inside regulated environments. I am thrilled to be joined by three powerhouses that presented this session. We have Wendy Fraser, Executive Director of the Center for Scientific Exchange Excellence at Merck. Wendy has been on our show before. She brings decades of experience building field excellence and knows how to go from pilot and concept into practice and impact. We have Annamaria Crisan, Medical Information Global Systems and Operation Effectiveness Lead at Pfizer. That's a big job. She is a force behind building and optimizing systems that really power scalable impact. And we have Rishi Ohri, Senior Director of Innovation Capability Enablement, and recently taking on Omnichannel for Medical at Astellas. Rishi's at the forefront of making AI innovation real, sustainable, right here inside medical affairs. So today, we're going to break down what they've learned, what's working, what's not, and where to go next. So if you're thinking about Gen AI or already knee-deep in it, this episode is what you've been waiting for. Let's dig in. As always, the points that these speakers make is their own from their experience across the industry and in their relationship with MAPS, and don't necessarily reflect the viewpoints of their organization.
Welcome to On Point, the medical excellence podcast where we talk to pharma leaders about how to build highly effective medical affairs organizations.
Let's jump right in then. Could we maybe just start where you started, which is why Gen AI and why now? Like, why this session even at MAPS? Wendy, do you want to maybe get us started?
Absolutely. Happy to weigh in. And I think what it'll allow me to do is provide context as to the lens that I brought to the session, because it wasn't the voice of just Wendy. In fact, when we offered to get involved, to your point, Scott, this is what everybody's doing, right? AI is on the tip of everyone's tongue. Everyone's talking about it. And I felt strongly that instead of use cases from just one company, from just one perspective, from just one person, the win here was to go to the field medical fog, a group of people that operate together for MAPS, and really get a broad cross-section of comment to hear from everybody what their field medical teams were either doing or considering or not considering as it pertained to AI. And I feel really strongly that part of the success of the session was just the realization that as an industry, we're all over the board. I don't feel that there's one way of doing this or one path forward. There was a lot of variability. And that's what the discussion was for. Let's talk about what's happening with who's having success, where do we need to pay closer attention? And it was a great cross-functional moment to share.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, I heard while I was walking around so many people going, wow, we're not as far behind as we thought. Right? Because you see in the news, right, Gen AI is everywhere and it's talked about so much that people can feel like it's like we've been left behind. But it was refreshing to hear that, there's so many people at so many different spots.
I agree. What is the right place? Couldn't agree more, Scott.
Yeah. So maybe, whoever wants to jump in, as you heard from the FOG members, as you heard some of the examples, before we talk about tech or how to implement, what were some of the problems that they were trying to solve? Like, why were they excited or why were they even interested in Gen AI?
I can start, Scott. Yeah, I think for me personally at Astellas too, it's an opportunity. Being an engineer too, like I think I look at what can we do with generative AI and Astellas, and I think if we think about some of the opportunities with, let's say, I don't know, insight generation or content generation, I think it's very exciting to understand what can we do to help automate and streamline the production. I think we're all trying to do more with less. And if we can leverage technology to be able to minimize or reduce the process, you can think of something as simple as creating a lay summary from something that's very complicated. Those are really important tools that add value to your back pocket too. So I think these are some of the things. And one of the things I felt was interesting from our session, we did a poll of the entire audience as to where are you in your Gen AI journey? And anywhere from how do you spell Gen AI to all the way to I'm fully integrated with Gen AI. And, we were, at least I was thinking that some of us might end up in that, we're piloting some use cases, 1 to 10, maybe a little more. But what we found is that most people are still trying to get their basic understanding of Gen AI and the opportunities that it provides and the use cases that we need to run towards. I think it is sometimes daunting, right? With so many different opportunities, you can get lost. It's really about starting with, where you think it has the most impact. So just a couple of the takeaways that I'd like to share from our session.
Annamaria, were there any specific use cases or moments? Sorry about that. Annamaria, were there any specific use cases or moments that just jumped out to you that you remember from the session going, that's a really good use?
Right, right. Thank you for the question. So indeed, like as the others said, Gen AI, it's here to stay. I mean, we are all hearing about that. We have been all amazed by this powerful technology in our personal lives. We all tried like ChatGPT or other similar capabilities, and we were all, I guess, amazed by the capabilities. I think in the medical world and what we try to do in our company, it's really understand the value of this technology in these very specific use cases, like in really the medical scientific information. Can we trust this technology, right? There's a lot of hype about it, but we always approach everything with a very scientific mindset. So with that in mind, we really define like specific experimentations. Like we defined the study design, we defined outcome measures, like really looking at some of the use cases. And those use cases were really aligned with focus area for medical information, which were answering questions, medical writing, insights generations. And we really looked at in particular, two outcome measures, one of them being around quality. Again, these technologies are generating answers or summaries. It's generating text. What's the quality? Is this complete? Is this accurate? So the quality measures were on top of our minds. And then the second was the time saving. Can we bring efficiencies into our organization by exploring these capabilities? So again, it's really a very scientific approach into these experimentations and trying to understand, again, the value of these technologies in our medical world.
Love it. I'd be really curious. So I've helped several medical teams start their Gen AI journey. And one of the things that I'm finding is that there's kind of 3 buckets of use cases. And I'd love to hear kind of how these aligned with what you heard in the session. The first I'm just calling like personal productivity, low risk, help me write an email, help me summarize this piece, right? Like something that is just for me. I'm going to look at it afterwards and still decide if I'm going to use it or not. Then there's what I would call like your process improvement. Some of the examples you shared around writing plain language summaries, analyzing insights, right? Things that have a little bit more risk in terms of an outcome. And because multiple people might be doing it, who might not be the same people who know if it's accurate, right? There's some more rigor put in. And then there's AI like for clinical development and data generation and things that face patients that are kind of really high risk. Are you finding that teams are focusing right now on one of those areas from the use cases you heard?
from my perspective, I think, in our companies, we are looking at all of those areas that you mentioned, like definitely personal productivity, and all the other use cases. As you mentioned the risk, maybe riskier areas. So definitely in that space, we really need to consider those quality measures that, or any measures we should be taking to ensure that we are providing the accurate information. And I think one of the other area to consider here in these discussions is, if we are bringing these technologies to create something that we will be displaying in front of our customers, that's obviously the risk is even higher. So let's say, creating a chatbot that is powered by Gen AI, so then the answers are going directly to our patients and healthcare professionals. The risk is much, much higher versus building something that will have a human in the loop before something getting out to HCPs and patients. But I think there is a lot of excitement, and for good reason, with Gen AI, and there are a lot of applications for it. It's just all of us have to use this powerful technology wisely and
Absolutely. Anybody else see any use cases that fit in those areas?
Scott, I'll jump in. I would add, I love what you just did there with the buckets, and it was the focus of the field medical portion of the presentation, because a lot of what you just mentioned are the folks that work in most situations in a headquarter environment to enable field medical. It's not necessarily field medical themselves, those that are doing external engagement, but the machine that enables them to do their job and do it well. So I feel that in many instances, the reason that we haven't seen is potentially as many use cases come out of field medical is a lot of it is focused on personally, how can I be more efficient? Personally, how can I change the way that I make myself more time efficient? But that a ton of work is being done in parallel by the folks that enable field medical. And so I think it's an important distinction about how, from a field medical perspective, we think about AI.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is really interesting that the biggest group, typically, that has the most potential to save time with the lower risk activities are usually the last ones to be able to get the tool to do the work. Rishi, what are you seeing?
Yeah, and I think, those examples are great, for field medical. And I know we'll hear from Emory on the medical information side too. The one that I feel like from my lens, and my lens is a little bit more broader. I should also have mentioned that I sit on the digital fog for MAP. So we're looking at things in many different, more holistic perspectives on things. So one of the areas that we recently leveraged AI for is our systematic literature reviews within our health economics outcomes research space. So we're able to understand how can we use this technology to be able to generate SLRs faster and at a higher quality. I think one thing that we learned was that it's great for certain areas, like for titles and for abstract screenings, but for other areas where it was more full text search, we definitely needed, as mentioned, the human in the loop component of it. And I think what's interesting to me here is that not many of these are going towards the HTA, right? So health technology assessments and submissions, and it's all very serious. So we need to make sure what we submit is flawless, right? And so I think from my learnings here is that it helps. It gives us a good first draft, but we do need that human in the loop to get it over the line.
Absolutely. Well, I think this is a good place to transition, because I think, a lot of what people are hearing is still theory, right? Or they're discussing ideas in their organization. And all three of you have started to share some basics around some real life examples of things you've actually done. And so perhaps we could just each take a turn and just kind of in your area of focus, What was the problem you were solving? How did you bring AI in to help solve it? And what have you learned by doing that process? Kind of where are you and where did you learn? It doesn't matter. Who would like to go first?
I can start. Kind of build upon what I was saying previously. Throughout the last year, we really conducted in-depth experimentation on those three buckets that I mentioned, looking at the answering questions, medical writing, and the insights generations. Across all of these three use cases, we set up specific measures, like again around quality. That was a very, very important focus for us, and around time saving as well. And across the use cases, we've seen various results. I would say a promising area was in the medical writing space. In the answering questions, surprisingly, at least for me, because I thought that, this technology, this is what they do best, they answer questions. But surprisingly, there's still work, there's still opportunities for us to further improve the quality of the answers. Because again, in the medical world, there's specific rules and requirements that we need to follow when we are providing medical answers, something that may be of less importance in the GPT world, let's say. But really, in the medical writing space, we were able to achieve like 60% quality in the summaries that were generated by Gen AI. Of course, a human in the loop will add the additional requirement to really get to the accuracy needed to be able to share something with the external world. But we've learned a lot through these experimentations, and definitely there's opportunities to improve the quality and everything that's around these applications. We've learned a lot in terms of things that needs to be done and how we could further improve quality. I think for me personally, one of the very critical learning, like early on, were so when this ChatGPT's type of application came around, like one of the huge value proposition that was around them was, oh, this is being trained on the whole internet. So that's huge, that's important, that it's valuable, and everybody thought it is. I think quickly we realized that for some specific use cases, it may not be, because then you end up with a lot of noise and maybe less quality information. So we really want to understand how we can limit to specific type of content, which is highly accurate, that should go into these technologies to ensure a good quality of the output. And then other things that we've learned is really how to organize this input that goes into those models. We cannot just dump that amount of content somewhere and then expect great results. So there's a lot of things that we can do. There's a lot of opportunities with these capabilities. And I think through these experimentations that we conducted last year, we've learned a lot, and we are in a better position to define better use cases for this technology.
Wonderful. Annamaria, you said that you reached maybe a 50 or 60% quality rating, but at what benefit? How much faster did you get that first? Because, the human would have to do it anyway. So was the gain in terms of getting myself or getting my team halfway there worth only getting halfway there?
Right. Absolutely. And the time saving was another thing, right? And then, interestingly that you mentioned this, we also looked at the time saving based on the task that was given to the Gen AI, while overall we've seen like around 50% time saving for very simple tasks. For example, we haven't seen any time saving. And why is that? It's because by the time you try to refine the prompting and all of that, in the end, it was not worth it. The human was faster by itself. But that's because we are on these learning curves.
Yeah.
And I think this is really a marathon. It's not a sprint. So there will be an upfront investment as you try to learn how to better prompt, how to define all those applications. And then in the end, it will be time saving. But that's, again, as I said, it is a journey. And in some instances, that's a very valid question. Is it, is it worth all this effort? Are we gaining something?
Yeah, well, and as you said, maybe might not have been the first time, but the 10th or 12th time you do it, all of a sudden, all those learnings, compound, right?
Exactly.
Love it. Um, Wendy, maybe you could share a example of how field medical is using Gen AI.
Yeah, as we were listening to across all the companies, people input what they're seeing, I feel like insights came up quickly and routinely. Uh, if you have technology that can make you more concise, more clear, I feel we heard from most companies that many of their MSLs are utilizing this technology once the information, once they've come out of a conversation to try to make that insight more concise, more actionable in its wording, in its tone. I think, as you were saying before, also the personal productivity around. I'm in a global position, and so for many folks around the world, the insight that they have in their head that they heard in conversation came in a different language, and so there's a real opportunity here to be able to work with the machine to give that insight back in the language that you heard it, and then work with technology to, if you are in a situation where insights are collected in English, to be able to translate that through, or vice versa. Something that's come through, translate it back into what is your first language in order to make you just more efficient, more quick to move. Similarly, again, on a personal level, I think we've all utilized it, all of us, either in our personal lives or at our work lives with regard to email. Catch me from making a mistake, potentially make me one thing or another, seem more formal, seem less formal. And technology is so easy in that space to get that done. So we heard that many MSLs across the industry are using it in that personal way. Make me better, smarter, faster. One thing that did come up, Scott, and I think it's important to talk about, is at the personal level. Again, I'm fond of your buckets. At the personal level, we heard an opportunity for MSLs to use it for data summarization for their personal benefit, but not professionally. Personally, can the computer help you summarize, try to remember key concepts, et cetera? But we all agree, and this could be part of the reason that we're not seeing field medical potentially use it in some ways that people thought they might. You still have to read the entire paper. You have to know everything that was in there, but it can still be used, I think we heard, for solid, again, note-taking reminders at a personal level. I feel those are some of the themes that we heard raised by our field medical colleagues.
Yeah. Maybe connecting two of the things that you had shared. One of the best practices that we've found as we've deployed AI solutions is when, as you were saying, Annamaria, when you have a more concise set of data to ask something to summarize that's contextual, the better job it'll do summarizing it within that context. Right. And so, Wendy, one of the things that I'm seeing as a practice amongst MSLs is that they'll use a PDF highlighter or PDF, kind of note annotation tool and get the important parts and then use AI across all of their annotations, because now it's a concise set of data that isn't noisy and it's contextualized to something that I was looking for. And it seemed to have increased their utilization of it.
I agree. And we did hear from teams that the more narrow the field that you ask it a question about, the more helpful it was. But I did see, Scott, across conversations with all the companies with which we were interacting, everyone continues to have a bit of hesitation in their voice. It's still critical that you've read it, that you understand it. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Watching you nod in
Oh, yeah.
agreement with where we're going.
Yeah, it'll still make some things up sometimes. Yeah. Rishi, maybe tell us a little bit about content generation and content distribution, especially in your new role around Omnichannel.
Sure.
What are some of those use cases you're seeing?
Yeah. I mean, as we all have heard, content is king, right? And I think content continues to increase at amazing rates, exponentially, all through different channels, different preferences. So how can we use technology like Gen AI to be able to keep things more level-headed, so we have more time to be able to process. So I think this is kind of one example where we can leverage Gen AI is to understand. I'll give you an example with the field, right? Where we have tons of content. Can we now train a bot to, understand that content and start to ask questions and interrogate the data so that we have the best opportunity when we're sitting there with the HCP to be able to ask and answer the questions appropriately. So I think it's provided us an opportunity, almost like a training to support the field, to empower them to support what they need to do. So I think that's just one example. But I think Annamaria also mentioned too, like prompting, like our skill sets and how we prompt. This is an area of, I think, opportunity for us to be able to know how to prompt. I think is an art. And many of us are trying to improve that as day to day, and I think things are getting better. But the more we're able to ask the right questions, I think the better the result.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that whole prompt engineering science, right, is so critical. It just starts with being able to ask questions. I was in a master class last night, actually, where somebody put a prompt that they created, which is basically creating like a plain language summary of something. And it was 350 words long prompt. And the prompt specialist, by the time we were done, it was close to 8,000 words. And then we ran the original and the new, and the quality difference between the two were just unbelievable. And I think, one of the lessons in there was really about when we're setting these up for lots of people to use, those 8,000 words can just be saved somewhere, right? We don't need every user to know how to write those 8,000 words, because Rishi, you can create something for content generation, and Wendy, you could create something for field medical, and Annamaria, you could create something right for MedInfo that has all that baked in. So I just have to write my one sentence and it knows the rest.
Agreed. I think libraries are going to play a role. As I consider life from field medical, they're just insanely busy, right? And the things that we ask them to do every single day, it would be nice, wouldn't it, if libraries were to become a part of what they have access to.
Yeah. So let's talk about one of the big challenges, right? So as you're getting Gen AI ready, right, people are naturally excited. They're also sometimes a little skeptical of the tool. So as you've implemented some of these solutions, whether it's in a pilot or in scale, what are some of the biggest risks or challenges you had to address when deploying Gen AI? Who would like?
I can start. So for us, I think it always goes back to the quality, right? So I think that's demonstrating the good quality of whatever solution we want to implement. It's key to get adoption, and compliance. It's legal compliance is always on top of our mind wherever we interact with our healthcare professionals or with the patient. We really need to ensure that we follow our guidelines, our rules. And so as we build and implement Gen AI technology, obviously the question is, can we do that with the Gen AI technology? How can we ensure that these technologies are compliant? Because then I can give an example, right? So we talked about earlier about the conciseness of the summaries. I think, with Gen AI, that's a great capability to have a short answer to something using Gen AI. Now, in the medical world, it is being a very short and concise, but at the same time being complete. That means meeting the compliance requirement. So if there are 3 studies and 3 studies present slightly different results, when we want to provide an answer to a healthcare professional or a patient, we cannot pick one study. We have to pick all of them. So when we when we apply this concept to Gen AI capabilities, we need to demonstrate that the Gen AI capability will not just cherry pick one study and, extract only that. So I think like really going back to the quality and ensuring that this technology are really compliant and we can demonstrate that, especially in medical information, medical affairs, it's really like we are really a scientific group and we base our decision on data. So if you can show quality with clear data, then definitely the adoption will also be higher.
Yeah. Annamaria, I'd love to ask you a follow-up question because it seems as though that standard, just that one example you shared, would be the same thing you would have to teach a human that you hired.
Exactly.
Right?
That's exactly it. I think Gen AI is like, like children that you have to teach them how to answer. And that's what we've learned. Like you mentioned prompting,
Yeah.
right? How we can take advantage of the prompting to make sure that we put in the prompt, please include every single study or whatever description you need to consider just to make sure that, the answer is compliant. But we will know that only by experimenting and going back to all those proof of concepts, because we may assume, oh, Gen AI technology is powerful. It will just extract all the relevant data from every study. Is it the case? Can we demonstrate that indeed this is what it does?
Yeah. Well, and I think about training and development. So much of what we teach new people when they come in isn't on a slide. It's not in a document. It's just sitting with somebody else and saying, "Here's how you do it." And you can't teach Gen AI that way, or you can try it as experimentation, right? But it's amazing. I'll be curious to see how, as we teach the technology to do things, and we have to have had it written down, how we can then bring that back to helping improve how we actually communicate it to humans. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Wendy, what are you seeing as far as some of the biggest challenges of rolling this out, maybe even beyond compliance, as you're bringing it, to people and the change management and kind of the efforts
Absolutely.
around that?
I love that quick clarification, right, Scott? Because I feel as we were having conversations around field medical and AI, it really was about change management and trust and proof of impact. I feel like right now in the headquarters environment, I'm hearing all kinds, just on this call, right? Great ways where use cases have identified almost in a quantifiable way the impact on an organization. I feel like as we were having discussions as a broader group, it's less so in field medical. There haven't been as many examples where the impact of this, the way that it can really change for an individual MSL, the way that they work or their success. I just don't think that we're there yet. And, is it just maybe needing more time in order to articulate that? Maybe. But also, every single one of us, when we interact with this technology, and we spoke about this at the session, you actually click. For me, it's pop-up fatigue a little bit, right? Because it clicks up every time I use it. So you just click it kind of out of habit. But if you really take a moment and you look in that, it really does highlight for you that mistakes can be made. And while MSLs cannot know, and we train that all the time, it is okay to not know. You say you don't know and you promise follow-up. It's not okay to be wrong, right? Those are two different things. It's okay to not know. That's fine. That's science.
Right.
But I think to have a system where we have conversations about the fact that it can make mistakes but seem confident while doing so, I think rightfully so has created a bit of a change management problem for those that engage externally. So I think time will help rapidly, I believe, here as we get better about the questions that we ask. But I think change management is something we're going to need to work on here.
I can add on to that. I think just another challenge that I've seen and I've experienced is with the explosion of Gen AI and even, our companies, like how do you manage the demand? How do you prioritize? How do you work towards, delivering when you have so many different ideas going on? So I think, some ideas might be like, some companies have set up more communities of practice within the company at an enterprise level to be able to manage those demands, because what we're asking for in medical affairs may not be that different from what's being asked for in regulatory, PV, or even commercial. So I think starting with understanding those ideas and seeing the similarities across those ideas, we may be able to reapply, our technology and we gain kind of economies of scale that way too. So it's just about managing the demands. In my eyes, is challenging, and obviously prioritizing those ones that have the biggest bang for our buck is sort of the other two.
I could also add to this as I was listening. I think this concept of fit for purpose technologies are very important as well, as we want to increase adoption and to address the change management. I don't think we have to push for Gen AI for absolutely everything. I think there's clearly specific use cases for Gen AI where this technology shine, but there could be other places where we may want to use other type of AI, not necessarily Gen AI. Yeah. Maybe we want to define some rule-based for some specific situation just to make sure that we are not providing wrong answers.
Yeah.
So again, I think fit for purpose, it's a very important concept, and not pushing Gen AI for absolutely everything. One other point I want to make is when we talk about adoption of any technology, not only Gen AI, but anything, we also have to think at how we implement that in the current technology ecosystem and processes. If we ask people to change completely their processes in addition to adopt a new technology, it will be more difficult, obviously. So as we build this AI capability, we always have to consider how that will integrate with what we have, how we evolve technology ecosystem, how does it work with the current processes. So I think that's another important consideration. And lastly, I think is the scalability, and that goes back to one of the points you mentioned, Scott, earlier about, so we put all this effort to build something, is it worth it? And the answer would be yes, if we can scale up to other maybe products. Maybe we start with one product and we scale up with the other products. But if we have to start from the beginning every time we build something, that it may not be worth it. So I think as we build these things, we need to think upfront of the scalability and build them in a way that would allow us to actually gain efficiencies in the end.
I absolutely agree. And, going back to how to do that, one of the things we talked about was how when you have a very narrow purpose or ask of a narrow set of data, you get a better response with Gen AI. The same thing's true when you do modular Gen AI. And so if you have one chat agent, GPT agent, that only job is to go into PubMed and find articles, but not summarize them, and then pass its results to one that its only job is to summarize but not interpret, and then it passes it to another one that doesn't do any of the first things. It just takes, right? Because if each thing, but then it also becomes reusable, right? Because those little modules you might use in 5 other things as you move forward. So I think that it's going to actually radically change the way we even think about, I need a system, I need a tool, because they're going to be so integrated and dependent on each other. Yeah.
I love that future.
It's really neat, right? It's definitely neat. And, I think that, Wendy, one of the things that we talked about last time is, I think that there's a change management strategy about keeping people in the processes and tools that they're already in versus asking them to go elsewhere. Did you see any conversation yet about how we're integrating this into CRM versus going somewhere else, or integrating it into a CLM versus going somewhere else?
I love that you just picked up on that, because isn't that what we all hear, right? If
Yeah.
you interact with an externally engaging team at all, the very first thing that they will want to tell you is, please don't make me learn a new system, please. And again, Scott, I think this gets toward, I believe an enormous amount of work is going on in the spaces that enable field medical. It might not even be felt, and should it be felt by field medical, right? Isn't the idea that if we're enabling the work of field medical, frankly, it shouldn't touch their workflow as much as it should just make it better and easier in the background. Um, Honestly, I happen to know just from talking to vendors at meetings, they're all looking to overlay. I'm sure I'm not speaking to this because this is not my specialty in an accurate way, but you're right. I think everybody's looking to lay it over what field medical is touching today. And maybe that's where we should all focus, right? Maybe when you put everything into CRM, it should do it with artificial intelligence enabling the way that you're doing it in the background.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's keep field medical's expertise and brilliance focused on what we need them to do, and that is to communicate companies' science to those external to the company so that they can make the right decisions with the right information, right? And some of this more technical work should be done, frankly, to enable them.
Wonderful.
And one example, Wendy, there would be, any kind of next best engagement, next best action capabilities for field to help provide suggestions of, where to go with conversations, things like that. So this is a great example of how we can empower the field.
Wonderful.
Right.
It's an exquisite example, right?
Great example.
Save their time and their energy for the place that we need them most. Do some of the back of the house organizing their thoughts for them, if able.
Sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, and Rishi, I think you were mentioning this earlier, is you don't need to leverage Gen AI for an entire automation, right? So, for example, I think a lot of people are really nervous to say, "Oh, well, Gen AI is going to tell me what to do and it's going to, do my job for me." That's different than saying, "Hey, these are the things that we want to notify field teams about." Like, "Hey, you should know if somebody
Yeah.
published. You should know if somebody." Is changing jobs. And then you can use Gen AI to support it. So one of the great examples I saw recently for Next Best is they were able to look at standing information requests. Do all of you have like some type of standing request for new information when it comes out? It lasts a year or something. And then you have content that's put into your vault or your CLM of some sort. And they just had a text engine that said, monitor for this, look to see if something here matches it, and notify this MSL when there's a new piece that matches something that you've been asked for, right? It's not coming up with the suggestion, it's supporting the suggestion that you already knew you wanted.
Right.
Rishi, I have a question around big corporate deployments versus small micro deployments, meaning, there's a line of thought in a team, and there's teams that are trying to build like the one AI solution to rule them all, and it's going to be the one that the entire company uses for everything. And then there's this other approach where eventually every system, CRM, MedInfo, insights, whatever, you're just going to say, oh, does it save? Does it print? Does it have AI? Of course. How do you balance kind of that big corporate need with the fact that every system's just going to have it?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think across what I'm seeing within the industry, there's a lot of this build versus buy discussion. And I think there's benefits to both. I think one is, we were talking a little bit about the privacy and the security and all of that, right? So how can we build this capability internally to protect our data is one angle. But then at the end of the day, medical affairs in a pharmaceutical setting, is then a software developer by training, right? So should we not buy the best thing out there and use that, right? But I think there's also across from what I've seen, like kind of a race to the perfect solution. And I think everyone's going in different directions. And I think it's more, as maybe Annamaria mentioned, it's more kind of fit for purpose. So I think that, you can't boil the ocean. You can't expect your one solution to address all of these different use cases. I think start with what is needed. And, that is a build internally activity. That's great if you have the skill sets and resources and the money, because then you can then apply that to other parts of the organization too, to provide that economy of scale. And I think it's interesting. If you ask me this question a year from now or 5 years from now, the answer likely will be different. Because I still think we're still at this sort of maturity state where we're trying to figure things out as an industry. But it's only a matter of time, I think, before that is something that we're able to operate.
Yeah. Um,
And to add to that as well, I think that's a critical question, right? Do we build one AI solution for everything within a given organization, or it will be like smaller, I don't know, sisters application for different use cases? I think that is a question. I don't know if there's an answer to that question yet. I think conceptually, a lot of the use cases will follow the same path, meaning that you will need to be able to input source documents, you will have the prompt libraries, and you will have a way to format the answer if it has to be a specific format or more of a unstructured. So conceptually we will follow the same, but then depending on the use cases, you may need different solution to address these three buckets. So the questions, I guess, still remain if you want separate application or one application for everything. One other consideration to all of this is how agile we will be to make changes to as needed to all these applications we are building. If we build a huge big application versus smaller ones, that's
Right.
one consideration. But then as a big organization, again, it's about overarching time and cost savings in building smaller application versus one single one. So it is an important question, and I think there's merits to both approaches. I think it's still under discussion. What's the best approach?
Yeah. Okay, I have a quick hit question for each of you. So, for the people that you've brought Gen AI to, and you've had them using it, what was your big idea? What was the best way that you found to help somebody learn? Right? How does somebody learn to interact with this technology? What did you have to do to give them the skill they needed to be effective? Annamaria, do you want to go first? Tell us.
No, absolutely. I think from my experience was really hands-on practice. Like you can explain how this works, you can have slides, you can read about it. It's one thing, but when you have your practical hands-on experience with this technology, it makes so much more sense. But it sometimes is very hard to even the concept of prompting. Now it's more people know about that, right? Obviously, but at the beginning, like, what do you mean by prompting? Why do I have to put a whole sentence or, like one paragraph of prompt where I was used to just type 3 words in Google? So just realizing the impact of prompting in the output, that's something that that really helped user adopting these capabilities. And yeah, so again, that's really, I think, hands-on practice. It's what was critical for the adoption. And then it obviously depends on everyone's personalities, right? You will always have adopters, like early adopters, and then late adopters. So that's also a reality that we need to understand, and we need to adapt, I guess, the training mechanism to everyone's personality.
Love it. Wendy, what did you find was needed to help upskill and teach?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, actually. I was not born with an iPhone in my hand, right? But when I interact with my children who don't know life prior to the iPhone, they have zero fear. They have no fear. They're never afraid they're going to break it. They're never afraid they're going to click the wrong thing, right? They just jump in and they do. And I feel that is the mentality that is getting the most currently out of generative AI. No fear, jump in, give it a try, see what comes out, and then continue to iterate as you move forward. I couldn't agree more with the concept of just hands-on, get in there.
Yeah, well, and I guess to make that feasible, you need to start on the lower risk activities so that you
Absolutely.
can just jump in and try it, and you'll learn from that to do something more risky.
Yeah, but I think that until you understand how to interact with the machine, your team's, you're asking me about field medical, and nobody is more clear about what they can and cannot do within the confines of field medical. So, everybody needs to continue to apply what they know they can and cannot do. But as we think about that personal bucket, which is where you and I landed with regard to field medical, in order to make your email more concise or more professional, more friendly, I think a lot is just to try and to better explore the capabilities of what generative AI can do.
Wonderful. Rishi, what did you find? How did you help your team learn?
Yeah, I think I don't want to reiterate what's been said, but I've always felt like knowledge is power, right? And I think if I'm able to share an example where one of my peers was trying to do a translation for a document and spending hours and hours trying to figure that, if I'm able to share very quickly how to do that, what I'm trying to do is build obviously knowledge and also curiosity, right? How can we leverage this for more? And I think for me, one of the things that I felt has been really helpful is we've created like a network of what I call more digital champions across the company that are really helping to support questions, things come up. How do I prompt? How do I do this? So these are the kinds of things that we can help influence, but you have to have that curiosity to be able to drive results. Because I've seen one too many times, unfortunately, where we can provide the greatest solution, the greatest platform, but if the end user doesn't want to learn how to use it, then it's just a waste of time and money.
Love it. Let's end on this last note, because you talk about curiosity and we talked about development. But most of what we talked about was for those that are just getting started. But the three of you are on a trajectory and have experience that 95% of medical affairs professionals don't have because of the opportunities that you've had. So for you, what are you most curious about? Where are you going to learn? What are you practicing and getting better at so that you can continue to lead this evolution? Rishi, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think for me, it's like in art and in science, I often feel like a kid in the candy store in my job, which is why I love doing what I do, just because it's just the opportunities could be endless. And I think that can also scare people right away to say, like, I don't know where to start. Like, this is just too big and I don't know where to go. I always have said, start small and sort of compartmentalize things, break them out into smaller, more manageable products that you can deal with, right? The other thing is, from an agile perspective and being it doesn't need to be 100% like full. You can start with something, start with an 80% there. And human in the loop is, I don't think, going away for a while, right? So I think that's another aspect to keep in mind too. But start small, think big, and have fun is my advice.
Love it. Thank you. Wendy, what do you think? What are you focused on?
Absolutely. For me personally, I'm insanely excited for what I believe could be the future. I feel strongly that the genius behind those of us that interact externally on behalf of our companies, the beauty there is trusted peer relationships. And the idea that there could be a technological tool that can make time more efficient to allow for more of that trusted peer relationship, the contextualization. I feel that the impact of medical affairs on outcomes, health outcomes, could grow exponentially. It really makes me excited.
Love it. Thank you, Wendy. Annamaria, what are you focused on? What are you learning and how are you learning it?
Right. So I agree with everything that was said. What I would add to that, and maybe that's because it's more aligned to my role in our organization, is around finding a way to explain some of the complex technologies to medical people. I'm also medical. I'm a pharmacist by background, but because of my role, I'm between technology and the business. And what I've learned that an important aspect of my role is to make people understand what this technology is about in layman terms. But not on the medical ones, but really on the technology end. I feel sometimes when we have bigger technology projects and we have our technology colleagues, they talk in the technology, obviously, terminology, which may be confusing for the medical business. So finding a way to explain what that means, this helps a lot with the adoption and really understanding, and also with the people to be more proactive when they are thinking at, oh, so that's the reason for which this happened. How about if we try that? And sometimes you may have very good suggestion from medical business people that maybe technology people didn't think of because they didn't have to think of that. But really only when trying to explain all of that's really bringing the best words together.
Absolutely. Well, I think all three of you are going to be and are fantastic translators. Sometimes, right, medical is from Mars and IT's from Venus, and you get into that circle of, what do you want the requirements to be? I don't know. What can it do? You tell me what you want it to do, and I'll tell you.
Exactly it. Exactly.
Right? And having somebody who can say, hey, medical, what are your biggest challenges, your problems? I get them. I understand them. Let me explain to them. Hey, guys, right? And so I think having that translator role like your organizations have is just fantastic. And I applaud all three of you for putting yourselves in the position to be able to do that. So thank you all so much. I know everybody listening is just going to take away so much. Is it okay if we drop your LinkedIn contacts in the show notes for people to reach you if needed?
Sure.
That'd be great.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I just can't wait to see a year from now, we'll be at MAPS and we're going to go, man, we learned a lot. So I'm really excited for it. So thank you so much for sharing with everybody today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
It's going to be a wild year.
It's going to be.